Hi folks, this is Pastor Dave Grisham here with For God and Country Ministries, and we're going to be uploading this video recorded tonight. We're going to be uploading it tonight. My apologies for not doing a video last Monday night, but I was ill and I was coughing up a storm, and so I didn't think it'd be good to get on the video and just cough my head off. So I decided not going to do a video this week. We're going to save it till next week. So today, the title of today's video is called The Death of Roe v. Wade. And this is something that we have been preaching for and praying for decades now as Christians. And oh, by the way, if you want to donate to For God and Country Ministries, it's $ For God and Country Dave. For God and Country Dave, spelled out just like that right there at the bottom of my super high-tech digital board. No, it's a dry erase board. Eventually, maybe I'll have something digital. Today, I wanted to talk about the Supreme Court case that was happening at the Supreme Court on December the 1st, just a few days back. On December the 1st, myself and a couple of dozen other street preachers were in Washington, D.C., and we were standing in front of the Supreme Court. And it was quite the circus. I've preached in front of the Supreme Court before. I was there with another group, the same group basically. I mean, it was somewhat different people, but basically the same outfit. And we were there in 2015 when they had oral arguments for gay marriage. And it was quite the circus then. The big difference between then and now is that there were 10 to 15,000 pro-gay marriage supporters in front of the Supreme Court, and only a few dozen of us Christians. We were heavily outnumbered. However, during this episode, during this Supreme Court case, which came up December 1st, the pro-lifers were 2-1 in the majority. There were twice as many pro-life people there in support of life than there were people who were in support of death. Murdering babies by abortion. This is a good sign. This is a good sign. We've been hearing good news about the Supreme Court possibly overturning Roe v. Wade. And that is also a good sign that we're hearing from the pundits, that judging from what they were gathering from the oral arguments that were being made and the questions the judges asked, they think it's going to be a 5-4 decision or even a 6-3 decision in favor of the Mississippi law that bans abortions after 15 weeks. Now, the reason this is important is because Roe v. Wade says you're not allowed to touch abortion during that time frame. And this would be a huge chunk taken out of Roe v. Wade. The Supreme Court also allowed the Texas heartbeat bill to stand, which is basically a total ban on abortion after a heartbeat is detected at about 6 weeks. The key there is that most women are not even aware they're pregnant until after they're 6 weeks along. And so this has effectively banned 99% of all abortions here in the state of Texas. There's almost no abortions going on in this state as I speak. Thank God for that. However, that lawsuit against the Texas heartbeat bill is still proceeding, and so that's going to continue to work its way through the courts. Basically, the Supreme Court has said we're going to take a hands-off approach and let it work its way through the court system and see what happens. And if it gets to an appellate court and someone appeals it to the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court may just decide to let it stand and not even deal with it, or they may decide to intervene. It just depends on what happens. If two different appellate courts get opposing rulings, then per the Constitution, the Supreme Court will indeed have to rule on that, and we could be in for another big day at the Supreme Court sometime in the future. Look for this Mississippi case to come out sometime in the spring, about April or May. And during that time, we plan on being back at the Supreme Court again for the reading of this announcement. There'll be lots of news media. There'll be lots of pro-abortion people who is our target audience for preaching to, and they will be there as well. Now, What happened to the Supreme Court was this. I wanted to kind of set this picture for you and explain to you what happened on that day. I'm in Facebook jail right now, so I have not been able to post any photographs or videos, so I'll just give you a verbal description at this moment, and when I get out of Facebook jail, I will post the videos and I will post the photographs. Excuse me, still a little bit of residual cough there. A little bit of bronchitis still hanging on. So we arrived at the Supreme Court very early. The case was only going to be heard starting about 10 o'clock. We arrived there shortly after 7 a.m., about 3 hours before the justices were even going to hear the case. And the reason we did this is because we wanted position. There were a lot of rallies and a lot of marches going on, both for pro-life and for pro-abortion. And we didn't go to any of those because most of those rallies and those marches, when they got done, they were going to culminate at the Supreme Court. So we decided to jump ahead of the game and get position on God's adversaries and get ourselves in a good place or good position to preach the gospel and preach the truth that God is pro-life and God is an abolitionist. He hates abortion just like we do. And so the way they had this set up at the Supreme Court is ironically, they had a side on the left, which turned out to be the pro-choice side, and a side on the right, which turns out to be the pro-life side. They literally had it set up as left and right. I'm not kidding you. If you're facing the Supreme Court building and you're protesting forward like this, on the left, they had the pro-choicers. On the right, they had the pro-lifers with a set of double barricades down the middle. Well, we didn't want to set ourselves up in the pro-life crowd because that's not our target audience. That's not who we wanted to preach to. That's not who we wanted to engage and convince to become pro-life. They're already pro-life. We don't need to preach to the choir. So we stood on the opposite side. We set our banners up, about 15 of them, straight across behind the main group of pro-abortion people, which was not that big of a group. They were basically just huddled in one area. They had some speakers set up, they had a microphone, and they had some people that came in and spoke all day. One of the most interesting videos that we got, I'm going to just love posting this on Facebook, where we were within 30 feet of Senator Chuck Schumer, who was standing right in front of us while he was speaking to all these pro-abortion people. And we were back there with our banners and we were chanting, "Chuck's going to hell. Chuck's going to hell." And we did this over and over and over again, letting Chuck Schumer know that the pro-abortion pervert that he is going to go to hell if he does not repent. And we wanted that message heard loud and clear, and he heard it. Believe me, when you see the video and you see how close we were, and there were dozens of us screaming, "Chuck's going to hell," there's no way he did not hear that. So he got to hear from the Christians that if he doesn't repent, he's going to hell. So Chuck Schumer, you got the message. In any case, we stood there with our banners up, and we were preaching right behind this group of people. And to say they were getting fired up and getting triggered would be a massive understatement. I remember several times when I got on there and I told them the only reason that they wanted abortion legal was to protect whoredom in America. That's what all they want to do is make America safe for fornication. They just want to be able to go out, sleep with whoever they want, whenever they want, and consequences be damned. They just want to go out there and sleep with anyone, and if they get pregnant, they want to have an abortion. They want that option available. They'd rather kill a baby than close their legs. And this is exactly the message I gave when I was up there, and they got really stirred up. Now, most of the day, the men like myself were not preaching. Most of the day, it was the women preaching. And they interspersed it with some men, and I did get a 15, 20-minute slot to speak, which was great. But mostly it was the women preaching. And this really seemed to get them stirred up too. Of course, if you preach pro-life to a bunch of pro-choice abortion nuts, they're going to get stirred up because they don't have any real logical reason why they believe what they believe. It is simply all nothing but a bunch of justifications for their sins. That's it. That's all it is. Abortion is simply a last-ditch effort to dodge their responsibility for their immoral sexual behavior. And that is exactly what abortion is for in America. So we stood there with our banners up, and there was news media from all over the world. There was ABC, NBC, CBS, CNBC, MSNBC, Fox News, Al Jazeera, you name it. You name the news, the BBC was there, you name the news agency almost anywhere in the world, and they had representatives there. Our main goal when we were there, as far as the news media was concerned, was to get our banners on the camera. Now, we knew from past experience that the news media likes to slant things. They don't like to tell the true story. They don't want to tell you that the pro-choicers were outnumbered 2-1. So what they were going to do is get right up in there and get this little group of pro-choice abortionists who were all fired up and having their little speeches with Chuck Schumer there and other people there, other little speakers there. And they wanted to tilt the camera in just such a way that it really made it look like the giant crowds were in favor of abortion, because that's the narrative they want to push. We did not allow them to have that narrative because our banners were in the way. Our giant banners stuck up 10 feet up above the ground, and they were over everyone's head, and they couldn't get any video almost. It was just nearly impossible for them to get a crowd shot try to make that crowd look large for the pro-abortion side without those anti-abortion banners right smack dab in the middle. Now, behind us, on the other side of the street, you have to understand, let me set the picture here for you. You've got the Supreme Court, the big columns, the steps come down, nobody's allowed on the steps. You get up on the steps with a preaching shirt or a banner or you're saying something, you get arrested. No protesting allowed up on the steps. But down on the sidewalk, they've got this huge, wide sidewalk right in front of the Supreme Court, and the Capitol building is to your back. The Capitol complex is behind you. If you turn around, you can see the Capitol dome. It's right there. Then you have the sidewalk. Then you have the street. Well, they blocked off the street on both ends of the block so that you wouldn't have some idiot in a red SUV decide he's going to drive through there and plow through a crowd to make sure he wants to make his point, like that idiot did at that Christmas parade up in, I guess it was Michigan or Wisconsin. In any case, they've got the street blocked off, and so you've got this barricade that runs in the middle like this. You've got a small opening in the back where people can go back and forth. You had a lot of pro-life people on the sidewalk behind us, back towards the Capitol, that were just a few feet behind us across the street. And they had the abortion signs, the graphic abortion signs, and these were the abolitionists. And they had all these signs set up along the road, but these are signs that are about level with your chest. They were sitting on the curb and on the sidewalk, and you could see all these signs, and I'm glad they were there. I went over and shook some of their hands. I said, praise God that you're here. Thank you for showing up. And if you showed up that day, or you sent prayers on that day, then thank you. We appreciate that. God bless you for it. May the Lord smile upon your face and put the wind at your back for it. May He make your ministry fruitful for participating in that event in some way. We needed the Air Force of prayers along with the foot troops, and we got it all. It was a great day for the pro-life movement. It really was. This is one of the few times I bring you good news on this kind of thing, but it really was good news. They were there, but you couldn't really see their signs. It was easy for you to dodge those signs with the cameras up on people's shoulders. So we wanted to put our banners up where they couldn't miss it, and so that's what we did. Now, the police came up and tried to make us move. And so I want to tell you what happened with that. A police, I'm going to say a sergeant, possibly. He might have had a higher rank. I'm not sure. It was so crowded. There were so many different police officers there. They came up and intermingled with us, and some of them got in front of us, and it looked like they might be ready to take us down, take us out of there if we weren't, careful about what we did. So we made sure we We're abiding by the law. But the police officer came up and talked to Brother Reuben Israel, and told him that you need to move to the other side, meaning move over to the pro-life side over on the other side of these barricades. And Reuben said, no, I think we're fine right here. We're not going to leave. We're just going to sit right here. He says, well, I could cite you. And he says, that's okay. You want to do that? That's fine. We're going to stay right here. And at that point, he said, I could bring up the paddy wagons and we could take you all down. And he basically threatening to arrest us. And Reuben said, that's fine too. You can do that. I don't think it's going to look very good in front of all this news media, these cameras around. But hey, if that's what you want to do, you can do it. At this point, I'm on the bullhorn and I'm preaching. And I get off the bullhorn and I turn around and I look right at this officer and I said, you want me to move? You're going to have to arrest me because I'm not moving. And so basically, I was representing the team with Reuben, backing him up, and we were saying, we're not going to leave. We're going to, all of us. He's the leader. We stand behind what he says. We're not leaving. So the officer just kind of went, okay, we'll be back. And then they went and huddled, and here's what was going on. As a former law enforcement officer myself, I can tell you just the gist of the conversation that was going on over there. There is a charge that they could try to charge us with that would be the failure to follow the orders of a lawful order of a police officer. The problem with that is the lawful order part. You see, in order for that order to be lawful, the officer must show there's an immediate need to move someone to protect an imminent threat of a breach of the peace or public safety. They can't just tell you to move just because they feel like it, okay? You have a constitutional right. We had as much right to be in that spot as the pro-choicers did. But they wanted us to move because basically they were insinuating that there was going to be an issue with violence or potential violence. And because, not from us. No, it would be those pro-abortion, people that murder babies. Those are the ones you got to worry about being violent. Not Christians, okay? If you're willing to murder a baby, we already know it's in your heart to kill somebody. So we know that you're a threat to breach of peace. You are a threat to a peaceful society, and you might kill someone because you're already in favor of killing little babies. So hey, the only difference between a baby and a grown man is some time. So in any case, the police were concerned that there was going to be violence, and it wouldn't come from us, and they knew that. So they couldn't move the pro-choicers. They had to try to move us. But we would not budge. So here's the quandary they were in. Could they legally arrest us for failure to abide by the lawful order of a police officer, failure to obey the lawful order of a police officer, if that order wasn't lawful because there was no indication of a potential for imminent breach of the peace or public safety, a danger to public safety. You see, like a police officer can direct you around a car accident because there is a threat to public safety. Because of the accident, it's there. He can direct you around it because there's already a demonstrated threat to public safety, so he can give you a lawful order, and if you don't obey it, you can get arrested. However, if there was no car accident, he can't just block off an intersection because he feels like it. He cannot do that sort of thing. So he's got to have a reason behind it. Because there had been no violence, and quite frankly, there was no violence all day. There was no violence. Everybody maintained their cool because there was lots of police around. There was undercover. As a matter of fact, I walked up to one of the undercover officers and I whispered in his ear, I said, there's a lot of undercovers around here, but they're easy to spot. And I walked off. And he just kind of smirked at me. They're very easy to spot when you've had law enforcement experience. But anyway, so there were undercover around, some that we probably noticed and some that we probably didn't notice because we were really busy. There was a drone flying overhead at one point. There were people up on the roof, probably with sniper rifles, on the building to our left. And I'm not sure I know the building on the right is the Library of Congress, but I can't remember what the building on the left is. But in any case, the building on the left had some men up on the roof with binoculars, and I'm assuming probably sniper rifles. And they were up there, probably armed, and they were watching over the top of the crowd. So we were being observed continuously by the police. So there was very little potential, really. I mean, realistically, there was very little opportunity for someone to get violent and think they could get away with it. You'd have to be just utterly crazy or stupid to do some sort of violence with all that police presence around, because you had Capitol Police, you had Secret Service, you had probably the FBI was out there, Homeland Security, who knows what else was out there. All these alphabet agencies were out there probably. Who knows? They might have had postal inspectors with guns out there. I don't know, because it might have been a threat to somebody's mail somewhere. Who knows? But in any case, there was no violence during the day, and so nothing happened out of the ordinary. Now, there was one question that I asked every single pro-choicer that came up and made this statement to me, or had a sign that made this statement. And you guys have all heard this statement. And it goes like this: my body, my choice, right? So my goal that day, and I thought about this beforehand going out there, I thought, okay, I'm going to point out the hypocrisy of their position on that particular item, because that has been a theme since the 70s for these feminists, these radical leftist feminists. My body, my choice. I get to have an abortion if I want to, and there's nothing you can do about it. So here's the question I asked each one of them. They'd say, my body, my choice. I'd say, really? Does that apply to vaccines? And they would just stare at you like a deer in the headlights. I said, no, seriously, do you support mandatory vaccinations? Because if it's my body, my choice, then you can't force a medical procedure on me. And they would always say, well, that's different. Oh, that's different. You see, there is no real logic in their arguments. You got to understand, when you're talking to sinful people, when you're talking to people that are so engulfed and so committed to their pet sin, they are going to throw out the reasoning of their mind to accommodate the lust of their loins, because they do not care about logic. These statements they make, like my body, my choice, it is just a political tool. That's all it is, to make a point for their side, and it's their arguing point, and they don't care if it's logical or not. They're going to stick with it no matter what, because they want the sin. What they want counts more than what is logical or true. They don't care about the truth. They care about what they want. And every single person, and there was probably a dozen or two, who said to me, my body, my choice. I said, what about vaccines? And not a single one of them would say, oh yeah, your body, your choice with a vaccine too. I'm opposed to vaccine mandates. I don't want you to be forced into getting a vaccine because it's your body, your choice. Not a single one of them said that. And I knew they wouldn't, because their side is not logical. You see, they don't have the truth on their side, and we do. Now, in addition to us going to the Supreme Court, that was the Super Bowl. That was the Super Bowl of our trip. But we did have some playoffs leading up to that. We went to the White House, and we preached in front of the White House. And I'll put a video up of that too. It's a very good video, actually. There was a group of school children, about 40 of them, I would say, 30 to 40. Excuse me. About 30 to 40 of them who wanted to get the school teachers wanted to get their picture taken. Now, these are younger kids, and so you know what that's like. It's like trying to herd cats. I mean, they're running around everywhere, putting gum in each other's hair and sticking their fingers in their pockets and looking around, doing whatever. So it took them quite a while to get these kids organized and settled down to where they could get this one photograph. And in that 10 minutes it took, we preached the gospel of Jesus Christ right straight to these children. They were a captive audience only 15 feet away. And we tried to hand tracts out to them when they got done, but the teachers were like, don't take that stuff, don't take that stuff. They were very offended by what we were doing. But they wanted their precious picture in front of the White House so much that they were willing to tolerate being preached to. And the pastor, the preacher that was up there, John Williams, gave a very gentle speech to them. He gave them a very gentle gospel message. because he knew he was dealing with children. He didn't go six guns blazing on these kids. He actually was very gentle with them, and it was a very good message. And I'll post that up when I get out of Facebook jail, and you'll get to see that message. You'll get to hear that message and see that video. It was really good. And then we had made up a couple of signs that I made and took with us, special signs, and these were about yay big, about the size of this board right here, maybe a little larger. And one of them said, "Canada, let my people go." And the word "C," and the beginning of the word "C" in Canada was a sickle and a hammer, like the communist symbol, and it was in red. "Canada, let my people go," and then in between "let my" and then was a cross. Basically, let the Christians go. So this was basically, in reference to Exodus in the Bible. And the next one said, "Free Arthur Pawlowski." And we took these two signs and our regular banners, and we went to the Canadian Embassy. And we preached outside the Canadian Embassy for a couple of hours, and we rebuked them for their persecution of Christians and the Christian church in Canada over this whole COVID nonsense. In case you don't know, Arthur Pawlowski has been sentenced by a court for, I guess it was, they found him guilty of contempt of court, because how dare he come to the United States and exercise his free speech and speak his mind, because as soon as he got back, he got arrested. And he basically went around telling the story of what happened at his church and why he went to jail, and they were just trying to have church, and they wouldn't leave them alone. They came in like jackbooted Nazis, and you've probably seen the viral video where he said, "You Nazis, get out of my church. I don't want to hear your nonsense. You're interrupting our service." Well, they couldn't even do it on a Wednesday. They couldn't do it on a Thursday or some other day. No, they had to come during church service and interrupt church service like a bunch of jackbooted Nazis and come in there and try to intimidate and harass Christians. And then they arrested the pastor, and they arrested his brother. And in any case, they other churches too. In one church, they actually built a fence around the church because the church, they told them they couldn't have service in the building, so they started having service in the parking lot. Well, then they came up and started harassing them and fining them over having services in the parking lot while they were sitting in their individual cars, distanced apart. Not I'd say being inside of a car is a lot better than a mask, but they didn't care about that because their goal was to stop church services. Their goal is to make Christians comply. Christians, we cannot comply. We are not to forsake the assembling of ourselves together, as it says in Scripture. And this Bible, this book right here, this book takes authority over any government law in a Christian's life. You obey this before you obey the government. If the government's law contradicts what the Bible says, you obey the word and you ignore the law. Okay? It's going to get you in trouble with men, but it's better to be in trouble with men than it is to be in trouble with God. And so Arthur Pawlowski, along with other Christians, have been persecuted in Canada. And so we went to their embassy in Washington, D.C., and we rebuked them openly. And we're probably all banned from going to Canada now from now on, but like I would ever want to go. Anyway, that's what we did on our trip. And I just wanted to give you this update on what we did and how things went. And I want to remind you Christians of this. This is very important. Before I get off of here, I want to say one final thing. During World War II, the Battle of Midway just turns out to be the turning point. It was like a midway point. It was a turning point in the war. America had lost every battle to the Japanese prior to Midway. And after Midway, we won every battle. It turned the tide. Okay? The death of Roe v. Wade, if the Supreme Court rules in favor of this Mississippi law, many of the abortion laws will just be turned back to the states. It doesn't mean that we've won the war. It simply means that the tide of the war has turned in our favor. And once that happens, that is not a time to sit back on your laurels and rest. It is not. Just like in World War II. Do you think they just said, okay, we whooped them at Midway, we turned the tide, we knocked out 4 of their carriers, let's let them go home and everything will be hunky-dory? No, they pressed on. The gut-wrenching, bloody, in the trenches battle from island to island began. The grueling, ugly work of the ground war got intensified. That's exactly what needs to happen if Roe v. Wade gets turned back. If Roe v. Wade gets overturned, we need to have an extremely intense battle in the trenches that Christians need to be pushing harder and harder and harder from state to state to state until in every state in the United States, abortion is completely outlawed. That we do not have a single child being murdered by abortion in this country. Until that is the law of the land, until that is the fact, we cannot say we've got a complete victory. We have partial victories, but partial victories doesn't win the war. The war is a much larger scale. You win the battle, you move on to win another battle. The more battles you win, the closer you approach to winning the war, but you cannot stop and rest and sit on your laurels and do nothing. We must intensify this fight. We must go further. We must push harder. We must pray harder. We must preach harder. We must contact our congressmen and senators. We must vote correctly. We must be politically active. We must be very active in this if we want to get rid of this Holocaust out of our country. Right now, things in America are going crazy. And I wanted to make a plug for another video series I'm going to do in addition to For God and Country. It's kind of a little side thing I'm going to do. Because I've had law enforcement experience and I worked in counterterrorism by working at Pantex plant for 26 years, I have some experience in terms of security. And so I want to give Christians a little bit of an education on how to prepare themselves and make themselves be more secure in an ever less secure world, in an ever chaotic world. And so the first video I'm going to make will probably be later on this week, and it's going to be called Situational Awareness. Situational awareness is key to your personal and your family's security. And you need to have a strong sense of situational awareness of what's going on around you and around the world and what's happening. You need to stay abreast of things to help keep you safe. And I will give you the principles of that. I'll give you some practical applications of it, and I'll show you how to practice it in your own life. It won't cost you a dime. The video will be free. The teaching will be free. And to actually implement this will be free. You can train yourself to have greater situational awareness. So I'm gonna do that video here in the next couple of days, and I'm gonna post that up on YouTube as well. So if you're a church and you see this video about situational awareness, I would strongly encourage you to play it for your church so you can educate your church members on how to keep themselves safe in a world that is becoming less and less safe by the day, okay? And it all starts and begins right here in the Word of God. The safest place to be is under the wing of God, under the will of God. If you're righteous and in His standing, in right standing with God, that is the safest place for you to be spiritually. Physically, I'm going to show you how to stay safe as well in the physical world. And so it's not going to be your typical guns, guts, and glory kind of videos, okay? This is going to teach you personal, practical tactics that you can use to keep yourself and your family safe. So in any case, that's it for this week. God bless you all. And I'm not going to say have a happy holidays. I'm going to say have a very Merry Christmas. Because if you take Christ out of Christmas, you've got nothing but a festival of gluttony and greed. So don't take Christ out of Christmas. Have a very Merry Christmas with Christ in it. God bless you all.